See this? You know why that needs to change? Because she works for Kurt Pringle. She's the vice president of Kurt Pringle and Associates. Do you know who that man is? He's an influence peddler. He connects government contracts to municipalities, to builders and developers. Hundreds of millions of dollars. He's the reason why we got that $120 million train station designed for 60,000 people a day that is being used at about 5% of its capacity. That's the biggest pink elephant you've ever seen over there at the ball game. This woman needs to go. She's pro-development. She's big government. She's a phony Republican. She was a Democrat. She turned herself into a Republican to get elected, and she got the vice president of Kurt Pringle and Associates right after she got on the council. And that's about the time that they started cooking up the DCCSP, which was a plan to rezone hundreds of acres in this city up to 10-story buildings. And as long as it fit the cookie-cutter box, it would bypass Planning Commission and City Council, go straight to Joe Fells for approval. That's what this woman did. And let me tell you something. Her plan was for her boss to get this town decked out in huge buildings. Well, guess what? We stopped it. Okay? We stopped it. She needs to go in November. She's the worst one of them all. And she's hamstrung this church over here. Jennifer Fitzgerald has people from EV Free all over the city at these churches washing police cars on these Love Fullerton days. She's got people cleaning schools, painting classrooms, cleaning up parks. Ladies and gentlemen, the church is supposed to take care of the poor, not paint government buildings, not wash police cars. You know these police cars? They're a lot newer than most of your cars, ladies and gentlemen. And they got really nice air conditioners and good stereo systems, all kinds of neat gadgets that they can spy on you with and read through your walls with. And you get to wash these cars. Instead of your church taking care of the homeless, instead of your church taking care of the poor, they're taking your money, they're putting you to sleep, while people like this run their dog and pony show and have you wash the police cars. Now, of course, you know, if the police murder somebody on camera and get away with it, we still have to wash the police cars, because that's just how it is. I could go on and on. She pushes for raises for all these public employees. You know, there's $1 million a year going into the fire department overtime right now. Do you know how many firemen we could hire with that? Do you know how many kids that are out there in college that dream of becoming a fireman? But you got people who have been working here for 20, 30 years that are so greedy, they're clutching their jobs, they're clutching their overtime, they won't let it go, and they don't want to hire anybody because they like things the way they are. That's wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to stop the overtime with the fire department. Let's come over here to Jan Flory. Jan Flory, she's a really interesting one. She's a divorce attorney. So I guess, you know, we've gone from a Pringle operative and a lobbyist. Now we're over here at door number 2. Jan Flory's a divorce attorney. Let me tell you something. I don't like attorneys. And the only time I'm going to deal with an attorney is when I have no choice. The last thing we need on our city council is a divorce attorney. And I'll tell you, she's out of here. She's not running again. And I'm glad she's not running again. I'm not going to say anything else about her because, you know what, in a couple of months, no one's going to remember her. Let's move over here to door number 3. This guy. He was one of Bushala's plants, Sean Nelson's plants. Him and Whitaker ran together in the recall. I guess he's a land surveyor. You know, Greg's really a Democrat, but he acts like a Republican. But he votes most of the time with Jennifer Fitzgerald and, you know, passes all these, these big government boondoggles and the pay raises. His voting record's really not all that spectacular. I am not impressed with Mr. Seaborn at all. As a matter of fact, he votes the wrong way most of the time. And when he ends up being voted out of office, I'm not going to be too sad for that. Let's come over here to this one. This is the one that I think deserves the most attention. Mr. Whitaker. You know, years back when I came to the council meetings, I was really impressed with how he spoke. And I really appreciated him until I needed him. Until I needed him to deal with real issues and address issues. And you know what? He's a bag of hot air. You know, he put the SCAG operative on the Planning Commission. Did you know that all the things that I've asked for this council to agendize, he's never responded to one of them. For years I've asked for things to change. You know, the city owns properties. It has a lot of real estate. And when the city wants some money, it takes it upon itself to sell some of these excess properties. They're called surplus properties. You know what? If the city owns the property, open it up to serve the residents. Utilize it. So we've got things that are being in negotiation in closed-door session, and in some cases to sole source bids. How do you do that? When you have property that's in the public trust, how do you justify doing these sweetheart deals behind closed doors? Why don't we put it out to a public bid, present an appraisal? How are we negotiating these things in closed session? I've asked for that to end. I've asked them to agendize that. Mr. Fiscal Conservative has ignored it. Let's talk about another issue. Let's talk about the Brea Dam property, and let's talk about the American Golf contract. That thing was drawn up years back, and the numbers that were presented at the time was adopted by the council, I believe, and so does the Mr. Levinson's analysis conclude that over the 20-year duration of that contract, it has cost the city of Fullerton $5 million in lost revenue. This is an ongoing bleeding. Mr. Levinson was the appointee of Bruce Whitaker on the Parks and Rec Commission. Mr. Levinson is a trained auditor. It's what he did for a living. Mr. Levinson brought a detailed analysis of this shortfall to the Planning Commission. Now, he was treated like a third-class citizen and shut down and ridiculed, and they went into absolute denial. This is a park and rec issue. He's on the commission. They tried to bury it. So what does Barry do? He goes to the councilman that appointed him, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker was presented with Barry Levinson's very carefully put together detailed analysis on this $5 million shortfall. What did Bruce Whitaker do with Barry Levinson's detailed analysis? Nothing. He ignored it. Bruce Whitaker would not respond in writing, would not respond in email, would not bring it up publicly at the council meeting, would not agendize it, and has since buried the issue. This man's not a fiscal conservative. This man plays ball with the establishment. Why do I think that? Well, he's Ed Royce material. What does Ed Royce do? Stamps his name on all the phonies. Ed Royce stamps his name on Jennifer Fitzgerald. Ed Royce stamps his name on Bruce Whitaker. Ed Royce stamps his name on Greg Seaborn. Ed Royce stamps his name on half of the people on the school board. How do you ignore what's going on and act like you're a conservative? You know, we have a beautiful park up off of Brea Boulevard in Bass and Cherry. And with redevelopment money, the city council approved some crony deal to build a restaurant called the Summit House. I like the Summit House. The food's great. A bit pricey, but the food is chef prepared. The views are nice. But here's the issue. It's built on land that belongs to the taxpayers. It's a park. That's why there's a sign that says Vista Park. They were given a 30-year lease about 15 years ago. This guy came to the city council. Actually, he came to probably Fells. And I don't know how or why they cooked this up. But his lease still had like 15 years left on it. And he wanted to extend it for another 30 years. Ladies and gentlemen, 30 years on top of 15 is a 45-year lease. Do any of you have a 45-year lease on a piece of public property whose views and potential are unsurpassed and unparalleled in this community? No. I can only conjecture that every one of these city council members was probably offered free dinners for life if they went along with this scam. Well, let me tell you something. Barry Levinson was on the Parks and Rec Commission. Barry Levinson and I were sitting in the back row of the city council meeting one night, and I'm reading over the agenda, and what do I see? On the consent calendar is the Summit House lease extension. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you're dealing with a lease extension on publicly owned property, it needs to go through the Parks and Rec Commission. The Parks and Rec Commission were bypassed on this. Bruce Whitaker was sitting up on the dais. Bruce Whitaker knew about this agenda item because he's on the city council. Barry Levinson was his appointee to the Parks and Rec Commission. Do you think Mr. Whitaker talked to Mr. Levinson about this issue? No. Barry Levinson had no idea about this issue until we were in the audience looking at the agenda, and it wasn't in a public hearing. It wasn't on a normal business item. It was on the consent calendar. The consent calendar is designed for things to just get rubber stamped. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're adding 30 years to a lease that's still got 15 years left on it at rock bottom prices, don't you think the public should know about this and have an opportunity to discuss and maybe be presented with possibly competing bids for that property to increase the revenue stream to the city or to reopen it back up to the taxpayers for public use? No. This is another example of how Bruce Whitaker, who is not who he claims to be. The Mayanne Johnson issue with SCAG, the SCAG appointment, we've already gone over that. There are other issues with these council members. But here's the thing. They're all bad. He's outnumbered every time. Because of Fitzgerald and Flory and Chafee. It's 3-2. But when horrible things get cooked up by city staff, when city staff's approached by the builder man and the developers, it goes through a process. Plan check, traffic and circulation, Parks and Rec, Planning Commission. You know it's coming. You know these things are coming. You're given these staff reports. It's discussed. The DCCSP, the Downtown Core and Corridor Special Project, that program about 2 years ago was cooked up by Joe Fells and presented to the Planning Commission. It would have rezoned hundreds of acres to mixed-use residential and go with up to 10-story high-rise residential properties, adding upwards of 100,000 more people to this community. Bruce Whitaker knew that was coming. You know why? Because he's on the city council. Now, he has an appointee on the Planning Commission named Kevin Pendergraft, who happens to be the president of a credit union. That's a pretty nice, steep conflict of interest there, if you don't ask me. So, when Mr. Pendergraft was at the Planning Commission meeting on the DCCSP a couple years ago, it was brought before them. Mayanne Johnson, who Bruce Whitaker gladly appointed, and Jennifer Fitzgerald cheerleaded for the appointment of the SCAG operative, said that she really wants to do away with Euclidean planning and wanted to streamline and remove a lot of the impediments to the flow of how things get passed. Mr. Pendergraft, with that body at the time, voted to postpone the vote for another couple weeks. This was the most important vote in Fullerton's history. The most important vote ever to come to the Planning Commission. Because this was the most broadly, it had the broadest impact of anything that's ever come before that Planning Commission in our city's history. Never before have we planned to go 10-story buildings on hundreds of acres. Never. Okay? So what does Kevin Pendergraft do when that second meeting comes up when they're supposed to hear this issue? He misses the meeting. Now, when Mr. Levinson confronted Mr. Whitaker on this issue and said, Bruce, you know, Kevin missed the meeting. Are you okay with that? Bruce said, yeah, I'm okay with that. So listen to this for a second, folks. Like I said, if you're outnumbered over here 3-2 every time, the only way to stop the stuff is to get out in front of it. What does he do? He calls off his appointee to let it go through. That thing passed the Planning Commission in a unanimous vote. Mr. Gambino, Ms. Mayanne Johnson, Mr. Silber, Pendergraft was absent, and I'm not sure the names of and Ms. Schanfeld. I'm not sure the names of the other guy. He's not on there anymore. But that thing passed a unanimous vote, went to city council. Ladies and gentlemen, they almost destroyed this community. This hometown hero did absolutely nothing to try to stop this. He had years to bring it up. Never uttered a word about it. Never mentioned it. Never raised the alarm. Never rallied the troops. This is the modus operandi of Bruce Whitaker. When he has a chance to get out in front of something, he does no such thing. What he will do is have a couple of his little followers dig up a couple $100 hotel bill from the police department in the check register, do a presentation on that, and make it look like we need an audit committee. And when it came time for the city council to possibly consider a financial audit commission or a committee, do you think Bruce Whitaker ever contacted Mr. Barry Levinson, who is a trained auditor by profession? Never. You know why? Because Bruce Whitaker's part of the problem. He doesn't want Barry sniffing around City Hall. That's why he fired Barry. And then he has the audacity to put this comment in the Fullerton Observer about some impending action relating to a city employee. Barry Levinson was almost framed by Dan Hughes over an issue that occurred in the lobby that was a non-issue, and the city's lobby cams clearly showed nothing happened. Dan Hughes drafts a police report trying to put felony charges against Mr. Levinson and Mr. Gutierrez. Well, they fell apart, of course, because it was a falsified police report, and it was a complete joke. But here's Bruce defaming and slandering Barry in the Fullerton Observer, doing the same thing, making it sound like Barry assaulted somebody. So Bruce has stooped to the level of the people in here. Maybe that's because that's always been the level he's been on, and he's just had everybody fooled. Now, this election is coming up. I'm not voting for Bruce Whitaker. I asked him a couple months ago if he was willing to save this city and come on board with Joe Imbriano. And you know what he told me? He said there's strength in running independently. So what does he do now? After he ran connected to the hip with Travis Kiger because Bushala was parlaying the party, now he's endorsing Pat Schuff's daughter, Sue Kapinski, who's a nice lady, but I thought Bruce said there's strength in being independent. At any rate, we all know how they all operate here. And we all know that no matter what door we go behind, it's a booby prize, ladies and gentlemen. Let's come down here to the last one, because there's nobody there. There's no name on this. I want to talk about the last candidate that needs to be knocked out of the ring. You know, Fullerton has an unsustainable pension situation. Ed Royce gave us the old guard, Dick Jones, Pat McKinley, you know that old crew, Don Bankhead, that so-called conservative group of, I don't know what you want to call those guys, but they gave away the farm in an unsustainable system of compensation that we are now dealing with. When we had a chance to throw those three out in the recall, guess who came to their rescue and defense? His name is Larry Bennett. Larry Bennett is a certified financial planner by his own admission. Larry Bennett says he wants to solve the city's financial problems. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're a certified financial planner and you vote and you work diligently to protect the people that ruin this city's finances, does that make any sense? Larry Bennett is an establishment hack. Larry Bennett is part of the problem. Larry Bennett is connected at the hip to Jennifer Fitzgerald. Larry Bennett is the same as Jennifer Fitzgerald, as Jan Flory, as Doug Chafee. He is going to give Fullerton more of the same. You have to understand that unless my name ends up on one of these, nothing's going to change. Do you think Jesus Silva is going to make a difference in this community? He's married to Sex Ed Silva. Her claim to fame in the Capitol was transgender bathrooms. She's a flaming liberal who's totally for abortion, totally for gay marriage, totally for big government, totally for illegal benefits for illegals, totally for everything contrary to hard work, diligence, and self-reliance. And this guy shows up because what? He hangs out with some of the soccer league people? No, he thinks he's entitled to win because he's Hispanic. Have you listened to Jesus Silva talk? Honestly, it's hard to believe that man is a teacher. That really concerns me. He has no solutions except maybe pot clinics and affordable housing for everyone. And he wants to move Fullerton forward. Yeah, so does his wife. Forward right into the abyss. Now, Mr. Mansouri is another candidate, extremely liberal. His claim to fame is he's a community activist for, I don't know, some sort of a teachers organization. That's all we need is more teacher-type people in this town. Look what the teachers' unions have done. Look what the teachers have done. Look at the system they've created for themselves at our expense. And so who else do we have that might come to the rescue here? Can we think of any of these other candidates? How about Ms. Kopinski? Ed Royce stamped his approval on her. She's never been to a city council meeting microphone in the past 10 years. So I guess she knows the ropes. No. She's going to do what Bruce Whitaker tells her to do. You see, that's how they keep things going. They put the plants in there, and they get their people in there so they can control what they say and what they do. And that's how things stay the same even though the faces change. So, you know, we have a group of people that are running for office. And Jane Rand's, you know, Jane Rand's has some good points. Unfortunately, she's way too green and too liberal and too silent on too many important issues. Her whole thing is, you know, development. I get that. She's totally ignored a lot of the other issues that are near and dear to this community, such as the drought being caused by geoengineering, the issue of wireless infrastructure, and the harm that microwaves cause human beings and wildlife and nature. And she flat out just doesn't want to deal with those, yet her own Green Party, it's part of their platform to be environmentally conscious. So, you know, I can't put my faith in her either. And as far as the other candidates, you know, there are no-shows here, ladies and gentlemen. How can you sit here and represent the voters when you don't even understand these shark-infested waters? They're going to throw you into the tank if you get elected, and let me tell you something. That is no place for a novice. This place is running hundreds of millions of dollars through this building. You see this building right here? This is the headquarters of a municipal corporation. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year come through this. And this building over here, that's the Fullerton Police Department. Do you know that if you end up in the back of a police car with an arrest record, it'll ruin your life. It'll ruin your kid's life. It could empty your wallet. It could make you lose everything if you go to jail. Do you think these people need some oversight? Do you know that this city council can't even give us a civilian oversight commission? How do we keep that kind of power in check with our elected officials if we can't even have a citizen oversight commission? We can't. That's a problem. They just got away with murdering somebody, Kelly Thomas, on camera, and they all walked, and they're going to sue for their jobs back and wrongful termination. Now, there was another nightmare that went on over here. There was a gentleman who was arrested on drunk driving charges, and he was in jail one night. And apparently he hung himself or committed suicide. And the officer that was responsible for taking care of him that night smashed his digital audio recorder and destroyed it. I believe that was the second murder that the police department committed that year. What happened? I think they fired that guy. But let me ask you a question. That's 2 dead bodies. Do you realize the murder rate 4 years ago in this town? Half of it was from that police department. And 4 years later, we don't have an oversight commission. What does that tell you about this city council? It tells you that it's more of the same. Ladies and gentlemen, you see that building across the street? That's half the size of the ones they got planned. That thing's 5 stories tall. They're going to go to 10 stories. We don't have any water. They tell us we don't have any water. The roads are a joke. They're full of potholes, but the police have new cars. Firemen have new trucks. They're getting raises. All I can say is it's time to throw these people out I don't care what your friends think. I don't care what the newspaper says. And by the way, did you know that the Fullerton Observer will not print my name when it covers a school board meeting at the elementary school level, at the high school board meetings, or the city council meetings? I've attended hundreds of meetings over the years. They will not print my name or mention anything I say. What does that tell you about Sharon Kennedy and the Fullerton Observer? What does that tell you about the Register, who won't cover these issues? We're out of time for today. But Joe Imbriano is not out of energy. And I can assure you, you have my word, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to smile at you right now because I love all you guys. I love your children. I love my community. I love my neighbors. If I'm upset, it's because you have good reason to be, and so do I. Let's deal with reality. What we need to do is come together as a community and start dealing with what matters. And that is our future. Our future is in the hands of the wrong people, ladies and gentlemen, and it has been for too long. I'm giving you an opportunity to change that. When I'm elected, nothing is going to be the same at City Hall. That you have my word on. Joe Imbriano for Fullerton City Council.